everybody, and welcome to the very first video version of the Wizard of Oz series, where I fortune tell, like a wizard might fortune tell, the regular season records for each team by division. In this episode, we'll be breaking down the NFC West. I do have articles out on the amateuragency.com breaking down the NFC East and the AFC East, so go check that out after you're done watching this video. But getting straight into the NFC West with the Arizona Cardinals, I want to talk about their draft. The Arizona Cardinals had one of the better drafts, in my opinion. They got a lot of top-end talent that kind of fell down the ranks, and they took advantage of teams passing up on these guys. Taking Kyler Murray first of all, was a really good pick for them to pair up with Cliff Kingsbury, their new head coach. I think we're going to see a lot of sparks there, similar to Sean McVay and Jared Goff, kind of how they have that connection there, and that offense was just kind of almost unstoppable at one point. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. They took one of the top corners in Byron Murphy, one of the top safeties in Deontay Thompson, and then they drafted 3 receivers to pair along with Kyler Murray. So they've got a young receiving core, got Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, and Keyshawn Johnson. So I like their young core there and their skill positions. The one issue that they had last year, though, was the offensive line. The one issue among many. There were a lot of issues last year for the Cardinals, but the biggest issue for me was the offensive line. A lot of injuries along the offensive line. They had one lineman actually play the whole season. The rest were just kind of sporadic. So they go ahead and get some more depth. They trade for Marcus Gilbert, who was the right tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get J.R. Sweezy. They sign him from the division rival Seahawks. And they claim Desmond Harrison off of waivers from the Cleveland Browns. Fellow amateur agency and my co-host on the Third and Wrong podcast, Steve Bolin, doesn't expect a whole lot out of J.R. Sweezy, but with that being said, having a little bit of starting depth for a team that was struggling so poorly last year, I think that's good for the Cardinals, and hopefully they don't struggle with injuries again, because that's never good. For some people, they like to take into consideration the strength of schedule, and the Cardinals have the 13th toughest schedule. For those of you who don't know how that works, they take a team's opposition, so like the Cardinals' opposition for the whole year, and they take all the team's records and make it into one winning percentage, and that's how they determine how tough a schedule would be. So the Arizona Cardinals have the 13th toughest schedule. I don't really like this metric because I don't think it takes into consideration how bad teams were last year, maybe got better in the offseason. Like the Browns had like 7 wins, but I think they could be a much better team this year. So that doesn't take that into consideration. Anyways, I think it's a stupid metric, but taking all of this into consideration, the prediction, or real news, actually, it's not a prediction, this is real news, and if you disagree, you're a coward. The Cardinals are going to be going 5-11. I think they're going to take the NFL by storm at first. That offense is going to make some noise, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to win those close games that good teams have to win and edge out in order to kind of be a playoff contending team. So 5-11 for the Arizona Cardinals. Getting into the LA Rams, as a Patriots fan myself, I was very happy to see the Rams kind of fall off offensively. I think that a lot of teams this year are going to kind of take that recipe that Bill Belichick kind of laid out and use that against the Rams. So I think there will be a Super Bowl hangover for the Rams. It doesn't help that their best offensive player, Todd Gurley, was injured, but that doesn't seem to be going away because it is like arthritis in the knee. They drafted Darrell Henderson as a guy who can kind of replace some of those carries and some of those touches from Todd Gurley. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's going to be enough. Their O-line is a little bit older. They lost Roger Saffold to the Tennessee Titans. So one of their starting offensive linemen is gone now. They signed Clay Matthews, so help on the edge is good. They got Eric Weddle for safety help. At the end of the day, I don't think that this team is going to remain as competitive as it was. I think that teams are going to catch up to Sean McVay now. The novelty is kind of wearing off, I think. So I have the Rams going 8-8, and that again, real news. Don't disagree, but I always welcome some good Twitter debate. I think one thing that we need to consider too, if you're struggling to get behind that 8-8, with the strength of schedule, the LA Rams have the third easiest schedule, so a lot of people will say, oh, the Rams are going to win 10, 11, 12 games. This doesn't consider the Browns, like I mentioned. It doesn't consider the Panthers, who fell off a cliff, or the 49ers, who were just bad. They're the second worst team in the league. You got to take all that into consideration and how those teams got better in the offseason. The Panthers, Cam Newton's going to be healthy again. They were 6-2 before he injured his shoulder, and they clearly suffered because of it. The Browns, they go and get OBJ. They go get Olivier Vernon from the Giants. Have a really good draft as well, and like Greedy Williams and stuff like that. But that all, I think they're a 10, 11, 12 win team in their own right, the Browns. And I can get into that in the AFC North episode. But the 49ers, finishing off with them, it's like, again, they are a team that got much better. So their win-loss record from last year isn't going to be indicative of what's going to happen this year. So that's why I think the Rams go 8-8. I think that those are, I mentioned 3 teams there, and I think that could be 4 losses because they play the 49ers twice. I think that could be 3 or 4 losses for the Rams there alone, and that's just against 3 teams. So 8-8, that's it for the Rams, and that's my explanation. Moving into San Fran, I really love what they did for the defense this year. This offseason, they go and trade for Dee Ford and give him a 5-year deal. But with that 5-year deal, because he's been a little inconsistent, what I really like about this deal is they front load it with all the salary cap, so that way Dee Ford gets a lot of money up front, but the 49ers can get rid of him for rather cheap after 2 years. So it's fantastic for a team. From the team's perspective, you get a guy who can contribute possibly for 5 years, but if he doesn't contribute or if he gets injured, has lots of injuries, you can get rid of him after 2 years and kind of wash your hands of that contract. Same thing for new linebacker Quan Alexander, who was one of the best linebackers in the league before his ACL tear. And he's still pretty young, so you got a good guy there for 4 years, but there's a potential out after 1 year. So again, if he suffers with injuries or he's not the same player after he comes back from that injury, they only tie up $14.5 million, and then there's $3 million in dead cap with that potential out after 1 year. So really good contracts for the 49ers. It's the same thing with the Jimmy Garoppolo contract, where Steve Bolin and I debated on the Third and Wrong podcast. Go check out that debate. It's pretty good. I won the debate, by the way. And next, for the San Francisco 49ers, I wanted to mention them drafting Nick Bosa. So those 3 players alone really bolsters up a front 7 that was not that great, not living up to expectations for a lot of those players. And now you have 3 new names that are just going to really take you over the top defensively, take some pressure off that secondary. And this isn't even mentioning their offense, where they're going to have Jimmy Garoppolo back, Jerick McKinnon, the running back, and they haven't really lost much, quite frankly, in this offseason. They've just really gained a lot. So I really love the 49ers, but I don't love them so much. I have them going 9-7. So above the Rams, but maybe making the playoffs, maybe missing them. We'll see how the rest of the divisions play out. I can't spoil those. Lastly, the Seattle Seahawks. So you give Russell Wilson this extension, this $35 million, but you lose Justin Coleman to free agency, their slot corner. You lose one of the best defensive linemen, Frank Clark, to a trade to the Chiefs. You lose Earl Thomas to the Ravens, and you lose Doug Baldwin to injury. So 4 starters all gone because of trades, injuries, free agency. So I really don't love that if I'm a Seahawks fan, but they go ahead and sign who did they sign? They signed Ziggy Ansah from the Detroit Lions, who does have an injury history, but he has been a good player when he's healthy. Most years, last year, not so much, but you get him at a discount, so he's motivated to go and earn his contract. You draft L.J. Collier in the first round of the draft. John Schneider, I believe, is the GM, if I remember the name correctly. He'd worked some magic with the draft picks, turning 4 into multiple. So really like that. L.J. Collier, I think, as a scheme fit, will produce. It's whether him and Ziggy Ansah can make up that lost production that Frank Clark had. So for me, it's the question marks around the defensive line and also the question marks around the wide receiver core. Losing Doug Baldwin, that's a lot of touches. That's like 80 catches a year. Gone now. And he was a force. Like, he never dropped the ball. He was very, very productive in that regard. And the Russell Wilson to Doug Baldwin connection against the Chiefs was just fantastic. I really loved that. But so that's going to be missed. But they do draft Gary Jennings and DK Metcalf. So you hope that those rookies can really produce and pick up where Doug Baldwin's production fell off. You have Tyler Lockett, but he's not really a true number one receiver. I hope that DK Metcalf works out, but that remains to be seen. He's a beast, but I'm worried that he's going to be he's a bust potential. But at the third round, it's not like you invested a whole lot as a Seahawks fan, but the hype is really there for DK Metcalf. So with all that being said, though, you got Russell Wilson as your quarterback. I can't give the Seahawks any less than 10 wins with that fact alone. So I do have the Seattle Seahawks finishing 10-6 atop their division. So to recap, we've got the Seahawks at taking the division title at 10-6. Then we've got the 49ers at 9-7, the LA Rams at 8-8, and the Arizona Cardinals at 5-11. I guess that pretty much wraps up. Thank you if you've made it this far in the video. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for the other divisions as I kind of come out with them, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'll put all those in the notes. Check out the introductory video. Share it with a friend. One share equals one karma your way. We appreciate that. We need help growing this thing. So thank you again for listening to me, and hopefully this has been giving you a little bit of value. But yeah, until then, take care, and we'll see you guys soon.